A good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 2 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. So, we'll be doing our grade 2 English lesson on adjectives and adverbs. And in our previous lesson, we did adverbs, right? And we see that an adverb, it either describes a verb or it modifies the verb, or it basically tells us more about the verb. So today we'll be doing adjectives and adjectives as well as adverbs, but it basically, like adjectives, they describe the noun or they tell us more about the noun, or we would say that it modifies the noun. So we are going to go deeper into what adjectives and adverbs mean, right? But before we do that, we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. We're going to log in with our username as well as our password. Once we've logged in with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 2. Once we've selected grade 2, we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of adjectives and adverbs. So adjectives and adverbs. So we are now at the chapter of adjectives as well as adverbs. So our chapter is adjectives and adverbs. The subject is English language arts, grade 2. And the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of adjectives and adverbs is to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And is the word an adjective or adverb? So we need to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And then is the word an adjective or basically an adverb? So an adverb, right? So an adjective, let's start with an adjective. An adjective is a word that tells us about a noun. So it's a word that basically tells us more about the noun. And when it comes to adjectives, right, then it often tells us what kind or it would tell us how many. So we said an adjective is a word that tells us more about the noun. Remember, I said it describes a noun or it modifies a noun. That is basically words that you can use in order to show or to, let's say, to describe the adjective, right? That describes the noun, tells us about the noun, or modifies the noun. And adjectives, they often tell us what kind, or they will tell us how many. So you can basically describe, let's say, a dress or something, and then we can maybe ask what kind, like what kind of dress, what kind of shoe. But when it comes to an adverb, remember I said that when it comes to adjectives, right? If you maybe describe a dress, then it's like asking what kind of dress, right? And then if you maybe want to make mention of something with how many, then it's like basically us describing how many items or how many things, um, let's say, is being described. For example, adjectives, they will tell us how many stars Jody saw. So how many, right? So what kind is like, for example, a beautiful dress, flowy dress, big dress, small dress. But now, when these things that you can count, right? And then we ask ourselves, how many? So we ask ourselves, how many? Because that is stuff that we can count. So the adverb, right? And so we said an adjective, it describes the noun, tells us more about the noun, modifies the noun. Now, an adverb, it's a word that tells you about the verb. So an adverb, right, is a word that tells us about the verb. It's like I said, it describes the verb or it modifies the verb. And adverbs, on the other hand, they tell us how, when, or where. So they tell us how, where, or when. For example, Grace ran quickly. So you basically, if you use the adjective of how, right, that tells us how. It says here, Grace ran quickly. So now it's like you're asking yourself, like, how quickly did she run, right? So the word quickly is an adverb, and it tells us how. And then the adverb tells us how Grace ran. She ran quickly. And most of the adjectives or the adverbs, it tells us how they usually end in ly. Like maybe the word quickly, sadly, right? quickly, and sadly. Those are words that ends in ly. So if we look at the difference between an adverb and an adjective, right? So both types of, let's say both adjective as well as adjective, they basically they basically modifies the words, right? They modifies either a verb or they modify a noun. That describes information within a sentence. And if we specifically look at adverbs again, right? It says indicate when, where, or how often and how much something happened. And then when it comes to adjectives, right, we need to identify the characteristics, the quality, and the quantity of a noun or a pronoun. So there are quite a few similarities between an adjective and an adverb, right? It's just that the one describes the noun and the other one describes the verb. And here we can recognize adjectives and adverbs, right? And some of the words, it's as if they have like both adjective as well as adverb forms. So many of the words have both forms. For example, if we describe happy kids as being an adjective, right? Because we are saying that the kids are happy. So what kind of kids do you have? You have happy kids. So it describes the noun, which is the kids. But now when we make mention of the adverb, right, also using happy or happily, then we say the kids are playing. How are they playing? They are playing happily. Then we have a smooth rock, right? So a rock was being picked up and it is smooth. We are describing the rock. It's smooth rock. But now, if we look at it in the context of an adverb, right? And then we can say that we are running smoothly. So, how are they running? Smoothly. Even here, by the one that says efficient workers. But now we are describing, or it's basically modifying the noun, right? Which is workers. So, what type of workers do they have? They have efficient workers. So, the workers are efficient. But now, that very same workers that are efficient are working efficiently. So they're working efficiently. And this is basically adjectives as well as adverbs. And how similar they basically are. So if you never knew, but adjectives and adverbs, they are quite similar sometimes in, let's say, wording or forms. But keeping in mind that you should know what describes or modifies a noun and what describes and modifies, for example, either an adjective or an adverb. All right, so we are doing our lesson, our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So we are doing our lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So let's go to aplusstudents.ca. And we see that our lessons are to choose between adjectives and adverbs. And is the word an adjective or is it an adverb? So now we're going into the first one where we are going to choose between an adverb as well as an adjective. So an adjective, it is a word that tells us about the noun. Remember, I even said that it modifies a noun or describes a noun. So we have adjectives that tells us more about the noun, and they will either tell us what kind or they will tell us how many. For example, Jody saw 3 stars in the sky. Stars, which means that it is countable, right? It is something that you can count because if you can say specifically 3, then it means that you counted 3. And then we have an adverb, right, which is a word that tells us about the verb. And adverbs they often tell us how, when, or where. And here we have an example of adverbs, right? Where it says Grace ran quickly. Remember also, so quickly, if you look at the word quickly, it says Grace ran quickly. So it's basically you asking yourself, like, how did he run? And he said quickly, right? So basically, it just tells us, like, this adverb It just tells us how Grace ran. So basically, most adverbs that either ends in how, they will also how, that tells us so basically, how did Grace run? We can say like the adverb quickly. All right. The first question says choose the word that best describes the noun in bold. So we need to find a word that best describes the noun in bold. So is called. Is he happy to be here, to be on the field? Or, like we would say, is he glad to be on the field? So we can basically say this is either happy so we can say it's either glad or it is happy. We're going on to the next one where we need to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. So here it says, I gave Aaron the last piece of cake, which means that we can say, I gladly gave, because gave is a verb. So gave. So I gave. So gladly gave. All right, let's go to our test. So now we're going to choose between adjectives and what the adverbs are. And we said both of, let's say both adjective as well as adverb, it either tells us about either a noun or verb, it either modifies the noun or verb, or it tells us or describes the noun or verb. So here it says we need to choose the word that best describes a noun, which means that it is the adjective. Do we say the quick train flies along the tracks or the quickly train flies around the tracks? So if we, for example, choose, then we can say the quick train flies along the tracks. Because it's quick, it's quickly, right? Is Owen gladly to be on his new football team? Or is Owen glad to be on the new football team? So we can then say, is Owen glad to be on the new football TV? And then Mrs. Hoffman cares greatly for her children or great for her children. So yes, says Mrs. Hoffman cares for her children. Does she care for them greatly or does she care for them great? All right, so she cares for them greatly. So yeah, keep your mouth in a, do we say in a safe place or in a safely place? In a safe place or safely place? So we can say the ladies smiled. Do we say smiled warm for the pictures or smiled warmly for the pictures? We need to find the best possible way to describe the verb. So we can say the lady smiled warmly for the pictures. And warmly is an adverb that tells us how. Now we need to choose a word that best describes the noun. So choose the word that best describes the noun in bold. And do we say important papers in the safe, or do you keep your importantly papers in the safe? So choose, do you keep your, and we said important papers in the safe because it's important, right? So now we need to choose the base that best describes the noun. Did Bob send a nice card to Erin for her birthday or nicely card for Erin for her birthday? And yeah, when it says that did Bob send a card to Erin for her birthday? So basically, did you send a nice card? That is correct. And then yeah, it says Zane saw do we say a large mouse in the field or a largely mouse in the field? And Zane, we said, saw a mouse in the field. So now we need to ask ourselves, is the large mouse and largely mouse? It's a noun. So here it says we need to use a noun to best describe the word. A mouse in the field. And Zane saw a large mice or mouse in the field. So Zane saw do we say large mouse in the field or largely mouse in the field? So we see that Zane saw a large mouse in the field. And large is correct. So now we're going to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. The verb. So I can, do we say I gladly give, or I glad gave Eden the last piece? So either I glad or I gladly. So we need to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold. It's a verb. So do we say I gladly gave Eden the last piece of pie, or I glad gave Eden the last piece of pie? So we can say I gladly gave Eden the last piece of pie. And then we need to choose from the word in that best describes a noun in verb. So is that angrily woman, Mrs. Baldwin, or is that angry woman, Mrs. Baldwin's sister? So now we are choosing the word that best describes the noun in bold. And the noun in bold is woman. So is that, do we say angrily or angry woman, Mrs. Baldwin's sisters? So we can say is that angry woman. Now we're going to choose the word that best describes the verb in bold, the verb, the doing word, the action that either tells us how, when, or where. Bob signs her name on each of the papers. So it says Bob slowly signs his name, or Bob slow signs. So we can say slowly. So here it says we need to choose the word that best describes the verb. And the verb is the doing word. And we said it is slowly. And slowly is correct. And then Hannah sad waves goodbye to her friend, or Hannah sadly waves goodbye to her friend. So we can say Hannah sadly, because remember we said the adverb that tells us how, it basically ends in ly. So we can say we need to base describe the verb. We need to describe the verb. Do we say Hannah said or best goodbye to her friend? Or Hannah sadly waves goodbye to her friends? Sadly. And there we have. And Shannon, do we say brave saved the dog or bravely saved the dog from the fire? So we can say Shannon bravely saved the dog from the fire. And we said she bravely saved the dog. And then the last one is Nancy owns a house in the country. So we said Nancy owns a, do we say beautiful Lee house or beautiful house? So Nancy owns a beautiful house in the country. So beautiful. Once we say beautifully, and then it means that it is. So Nancy owns a beautiful house in the country, not a beautifully. Beautifully, or words that ends in ly, we say most of the words, right? You need to specifically look at the sentence. Because the sentence basically like has, it's almost like it has a pattern currently. So if there is an ly next to the word, so we can say Nancy owns a beautiful house in the country. So beautiful. Beautiful and peaceful. And we can then say lastly that is calm. So is calm glad to be on the new football team. So is called glad to be on the new football team. And remember, we are basically choosing between an adjective and we chose between an adverb. And basically we basically had to say what an adverb is and what an adjective is. We said an adjective, it describes, modifies, or tells us more about the noun. Whereas an adverb, it describes, modify, or tells us more about the verb. And most of the inside, let's say the inside or more about adjectives, right? Is that adjectives, like we said, it tells us about noun, and adverbs, they tell us more about the verb and they play a musical instrument, for example. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on adjectives and adverbs. So great too. Thank you very much for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.